Hasan, how's it going?
Pretty good, man. Pretty good so far. I'm actually shocked that this is going a lot more cordial than I
Yeah, I
thought.
know. I've done AMAs in here also and been generally pleased with how they conduct things. I think it's really good.
Thank
Okay.
Okay, so my question for you is on veganism. It's pretty simple. So my question to you would be, if we swap all the traits true of animals to match those of humans, is there any trait that once switched would justify making humans into hamburgers?
Oh no, we're doing the name the trait game. This is like the impossible to defeat veganism argument. My my response to that is that the capacity to build civilizations. I know it's like kind of vague, but uh, like whenever I think animals get close to even the capacity of being able to build civilizations, um, and I define this like I'm a speciesist, I guess. This is the term that the vegans have given me in my chat, and they get very upset at me whenever I talk about this. But I think that there are different species that we oftentimes don't eat. Monkeys, given the fact that I believe it gives you like a specific disorders if you do eat them. Um, uh, and also because they are the closest to human beings as far as a capability of building civilizations. So that's my perspective on it. And now, if you were to turn around and say disabled people don't have the capacity to build civilizations, then it's a little different. I guess you'd have to specify exactly what kind of disabled person we're talking about. I still think that they do have more of a capacity than animals do.
Okay, well, that is what I would turn around and say to you. So if you name the trait the capacity to build civilization, I don't see a meaningful way in which a severely disabled person would be able to build a civilization. I don't see how they would be able to do that any more so than, for example, a cow. Like if we take someone who's severely autistic, who's not going to be able to comprehend, basic level math that you would learn in public school. I mean, that person is not going to be building civilization anytime soon. They're not going to be building anything more complicated than a beaver dam.
They're still
So,
more intelligent than monkeys are, though.
well, we're not even.
And by the way, we're
We're,
looking at across the board. Like I would rather look at the averages instead of instead of the smartest monkey compared to the most intellectually disabled person. Feel me?
oh, okay. Well, yeah. So I hear you using a combination now. So what you're doing is species normality. So you're going for the average characteristic of the species as opposed to looking at the specific members. So I would assume that that's to cover
Oh,
the
by the way,
members who
sorry,
don't meet.
not to cut you off, but I was gonna say I acknowledge that I'm a hypocrite when it comes to this. Just for the record, just so people understand. I know I'm totally a hypocrite and illogical, I guess. But just I know that like what I'm doing is not perfectly moral. It works
Mhm.
alongside my personal philosophy, but I know that it's still immoral to consume animal meat, especially from an
Um,
environmental, especially when considering the environmental impact. But that is something that
well,
we can scale back dramatically through legislation, uh, rather than just wholesale stopping the consumption of animal meat.
I'll make a little comment or two, then return to name the trait. So first of all, I'd acknowledge it's definitely good of you to be willing to concede that on some level there's something you're doing here that you're not comfortable with or that you think is wrong. There's something slightly weird about saying that the way you're acting is consistent with your philosophy and immoral, because that would imply that your philosophy is immoral. And then just with the actual trait that you named, right?
Well,
You
it's
put out a
immoral from I wouldn't consider myself a moral objectivist. I'm not like I don't think there's an objective morality, so maybe that's why there's a difference there. Like my personal philosophy, I believe in hedonism to an extent. So I think that when it comes to meat consumption of animals, not humans, obviously, it doesn't hit my bar for what I would deem unacceptable
yeah,
personally.
so I am also a moral subjectivist, but that wouldn't be relevant to the question of whether you saying that veganism is, or that you're not being vegan is immoral and still consistent with your philosophy would imply that your philosophy is immoral, right? That would be true on your account, regardless of whether you're a moral objectivist or a moral subjectivist.
No,
And then
I
just
was appealing to what I assume is like the sorry, I shouldn't have assumed that you I don't know are a
it's all good.
moral realist. That's why
I wasn't suggesting that you were assuming that. I was just clarifying that we're on the same page there.
Okay. Yeah.
And then just if you have more to say, go ahead.
No, that's it. Go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah. So, and then I just put the third point to you, right? So that would just be returning to name the trait. So the traits that I hear you putting on the table are a combination of species normality. So that's looking at the overall character of the species and intelligence. So you're saying that the mentally disabled humans who don't have the capacity to build civilization, they're actually covered because the average member of the species is able to do this, right? So all that we have to do to get around that is go to a situation where 51% of people are mentally disabled, and then in that situation,
or if 50, or is instead, if 51% of monkeys, for example, had this capacity, I don't even advocate to eat monkeys regardless. I think we shouldn't be eating monkeys. Like that's my point, is that when it comes to cows and different species, I think I look at I analyze their capacity to, I guess, build civilizations or violate the non-aggression principle or violate a social contract of sorts. And if they don't have the capacity, then I look at what kind of traits they have and how human-like the qualities are. Can they utilize tools? Can they communicate with us in certain ways? And I know that, of course, all animals still have some capacity, but I just don't have a. I don't think it's across the board. I don't think it's completely immoral to consume animals. At the current state of meat production, at the way it is right now, I absolutely think it's ridiculous, and we have a massive abundance, and it's also ruining the environment. That's terrible. I think we should dramatically reduce it. We should dramatically scale it back. And we should redistribute all of that as best as we possibly can. But I don't have I don't think about it on such black and white terms. Now, the question I would ask you is: do you think that animals and human beings are on the same wavelength? And is there any hypothetical scenario that you would justify eating an animal before a human being?
Okay, I'm going to answer that. I just want to point out that what you've done there is taken the line of questioning and not fully addressed my question. So I'm going to put my question back to you after I answer your question. So you're asking if across the board, I would say that there is absolutely no situation where it's appropriate to kill an animal, or could you repeat it if I didn't get it properly?
I said that can you figure out if there is a hypothetical situation in which you would prioritize a human being's life before you would prioritize an animal's life? Because you don't think they're on the same wavelength, right?
No, of course not. So I can tell you both why I think they're not on the same wavelength, and I can list. I mean, I could just endlessly list such situations, right? So the thing that I value is sentience, right? So by that, I mean a being's subjective experience. Is it like something to be that being? It's not like something to be a rock. It is like something to be a chicken. What I value is that subjective capacity for suffering, for well-being, for affective states, right?
Look,
now,
I understand that
Hasan,
I arbitrarily...
Is it okay if I answer first?
Yeah, go ahead. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah. No, you could, when it's your AMA.
No, go ahead. But we are taking up too much time, so this might be the last answer.
Sure. I'll speed it right along. Okay, so just to answer your question. So yeah, what I value is sentience, and I do value that to different degrees because beings can manifest it to different degrees, right? You're going to live orders of magnitude longer than a fly. You're going to experience mental states that are vastly more meaningful than a fly. And if I have to choose between killing you and a fly or killing you and a pig, I'm going to kill that lower sentience being before you. In any situation you put on the table where it's just a choice between the two and everything else is held constant, and I have to kill one or the other.
Yeah.
And
okay.
Then just to return my question to you, and you can answer it or not, but I would just like to complete by saying it. I've heard you put species normality on civilization building on the table, right? So that
Okay,
would be
wait. Let me
the
ask you something. Let me just ask you something. I
okay.
don't value sentience. I value humankind. Can you compel me to value sentience over mankind? And I get
I
it. This is
can't.
arbitrary, but I'm just asking you if you could change my mind. I would seriously consider it.
Well, I mean, for the record, I'm happy to talk more about this at any time if you want to, because we're getting cut short here. But I can't compel you to value anything, so the answer is no. But I could point out the logical consequences of the ethical system that you currently have on the table, and see if you really are comfortable with them. And I have a feeling, based on my rough knowledge of you as a kind of progressive type guy who seems concerned about issues of justice, that you likely would not be. And I'll just return my question to you, and then you can say what you want, and we'll call it there.
But
I would just say that
can I not arbitrarily value humans as a kind of species that could be protected just simply on the virtue of being human beings alone,
you
above
could
all
have.
other animals? And the reason why I say this is because there was certainly a time and place when meat consumption was absolutely even more justified than it is today. So I don't have a that's part of the reason why I don't have an issue with this.
So your question is, if you could choose to just value humanity, to hold your moral axiom as what I value is just humankind, not
Yes.
sentience.
Yes.
You could,
And
you
I do,
could,
and we all do it. And I'm gonna go ahead and assume that you probably do it as well, regardless of how morally consistent you are as a vegan. Because there are certainly, as you admitted already, hypothetical scenarios in which you would slay an animal in an effort to save a human being, which shows me
uh,
that there are certainly instances where you would still kill a human being in order to spare kill an animal in order to spare the human being.
yeah, but there's a slight problem with what you said there, which is that that could be justified on grounds of sentience, not necessarily on grounds of preferring humanity, right? And I was also going to say that yes, you could choose to
Wait, how could you
arbitrarily.
justify it on sentience just because like a fly lives or a pig doesn't have the same life sentence as a human being does, and that's the reason. So would you kill
If I were
a younger would you kill a crippled child over I don't know, someone who's healthier, like.
Well, okay, you're asking me multiple questions, so I'm just going to zero in on the first one right now because we're on a quick time frame. So you're asking me about how could I justify choosing a human over an animal on grounds of sentience as opposed to humanity? Well, I could even give you like a formal argument. It would be like, if you have to make a choice between two beings of different sentience levels, in terms of which to keep alive, you should preserve the one with the higher sentience level. A human has a higher sentience level than whatever animal we're taking in question. Therefore, if you have the choice between the two, you should select the human. So
So
you could certainly justify
would you
that on
kill a
grounds of
comatose?
sentience.
Would you kill a comatose human being, or would you kill a fly to save the comatose human being?
Is the human being actually non-sentient?
I
And
guess
I'd also,
what
I,
would
I
a
also,
comatose human being still be considered sentient? I don't know.
I'm
I'm
happy.
trying to use I'm trying to use your terms. I know that sentience is like a common term that everyone knows. I'm just trying to see that. A comatose human being
Yeah,
does not have, I guess, full sentience. They're if they're brain dead, right?
yeah. But okay, now I'm happy to answer that, but I do want you to acknowledge that what you're doing right now is dodging my question. I don't mean that rudely, but
No,
there's a
it's fine.
question that I've been
I'm
trying to.
genuinely
Yeah,
curious to hear your perspective on this. Sorry, I know that this is supposed to be
yeah.
my AMA, but
So,
I do wanna
well,
figure
I
this
mean,
out.
yeah, that's totally fine. Well, here's the thing: you can ask me gray area questions, right? Now, I don't know exactly what you think when you say comatose, and I don't want you to get some gotcha on me where I'm saying go kill people in the hospital who might wake up, because that's obviously not what I'm going to say. Now, if you're talking about a human who's actually brain dead, and you ask me which has the higher intrinsic value, a brain dead human, so a human who has no sentience and no potential for sentience, or a fly, the fly would have a higher value. Now, that there's also a consideration of extrinsic value, right? Because it could be that you're not wronging that human, by killing them, right? They're not experiencing anything. Nothing is being taken away from them. But there may be people who care about them and they have extrinsic value. And it could be that the suffering, the extrinsic value of that suffering is actually higher than the life value or the sentience value of the fly. So you might say, it would cause so much suffering to the people around this person to kill them that we would not do that. It would be preferable to kill the fly. Now, I would say, though, that there are cases when we end up with someone who there's no chance of sentience and the family does, in fact, want to unplug them, and it's perfectly legal to do so. And I'm just going to really kind of hammer this. I'm going to want to put the question back to you, Hasan. So the question that I want the answer to, right, is I asked you to name the trait. You put civilization on the table. I know you've probably talked to Destiny about this, so you know the response that's coming at you, which is, okay, well, what about humans who have not got the capacity to build civilization? At least you can. Wait, please let me finish.
Sorry, go ahead.
That's okay. No, that's totally fine. Who don't have any higher capacity to build civilization than the animals that we're currently eating. Now, you've tried to hedge around that by which I'm not saying anything. That's not a shot at you, but you're trying to hedge around that by saying, well, it's about the overall character of the species. So you have these two things on the table.
Yeah,
right?
I started off by saying I'm a speciesist, and the capacity that I would try to hammer it, aside from just saying I arbitrarily value humans on the fact that they're humans alone. But I tried to hammer that to a specific. Point, but it's very difficult. And I think you also understand that as well, given the fact that you're just talking about externalities. Like, being a human being is very complex. Maybe on the virtue that we are human beings, we understand it. We understand how complex it is in ways that we can never figure out how complex it would be to be a fly. So on sentience alone, it's very hard to have this conversation, as you just demonstrated yourself. So that's precisely why I don't want you to get too caught up on the fact that I said the capacity to build civilizations. It's that they're human beings, and I don't exactly know why I find them to be a higher at a higher value, but maybe it's because I am a human being myself.
Yeah,
that could be why.
I mean, there's probably some descriptive account of why you care about that. You probably talk about evolution and culture and whatnot, but we're talking really about your prescriptive ethics. So I hear you giving kind of three things, right? And all right,
this is definitely the last part, by the way, because you're taking up other.
Oh yeah, I'm just waiting for you to tell me you want me to get off. Frankly.
Okay, go on. I want to hear your last point.
Yep, that's totally fine. Yeah, so I've heard you put kind of three things on the table. So the first one was civilization. The mentally disabled person question is coming at you in response to that, right? So you hedge that by saying, okay, it's about the overall capacity of the species. So the reductio on that one is if 51% of people are mentally disabled, the overall capacity of the species can't be said to build civilization anymore. That's not overall true of humans. Now, I also hear you. So in that case, if that were the trait combo that you're putting out, the species normality in combination with ability to build civilization, you'd have to bite the bullet on saying that it's fine to Holocaust people if 51% of the population is sufficiently low intelligence that they couldn't build civilization to any greater degree than an animal. And then secondly, you also put out this property of human.
No, I wouldn't, because I said I acknowledge that it's arbitrary.
Hasan, can I get my last word out and then you just say your thing?
But I already mentioned that I value humans on strictly on the fact that they're human beings. So you're like, it's not necessarily immoral. I guess it's more so illogical. And I acknowledge that it's illogical by opening up by saying, look, I get it. I'm a speciesist. I guess it's a moral flaw that I have, or maybe it's a logical flaw that I have. But I value human beings on the virtue that they're human beings. And therefore, of course, I would not advocate to Holocaust a population, even if they were 51% lacking the capacity to build a civilization. Does it make sense?
Yep. I hear you saying that. So yeah, I was just going to complete there. So I've heard there was this combo initially of civilization and species normality, but you're saying, you don't fully want to put that out because it's just something about humanity. Maybe you're wrong to value it, whatever. You're kind of hedging it. But I'd also just point out the humanity reductio, which is if you say the thing you value is just humanity, if we had human level consciousness in something non-human, you'd have to be comfortable murdering that as well. So
no, I wouldn't. That's the point I was trying to make, is the reason why I'm not comfortable eating monkeys and whatnot is precisely because of that. I think that there are certain animals that,
Mhm.
that reach even higher than others, and in which case we should not eat them. But other animals,
That
I
doesn't
feel comfortable eating.
wait, that doesn't totally make sense. You can't justify not eating those animals on
I
grounds
still
that
wouldn't
they're human.
care.
There
I
has to
guess
be
I still
some
wouldn't
other
care. You're right.
axiom
You're
in
right.
play.
You're right. I wouldn't care if people ate monkeys, but I personally wouldn't do it. That's what I'm talking about.
Okay.
Okay, but
Um,
we're not just talking about monkeys. We're talking about creatures that could be subjectively identical to humans, but not have human DNA. So to Holocaust
Yeah.
them would be no different subjectively than what happened in the Jewish Holocaust, for example. And if your sole moral value were humanity, you would have
Do
to
you
be
really think
comfortable with
that?
that.
Let me ask you. Do you really think that? Honestly.
I don't think that that is what you would actually be comfortable with, which is why I think that the moral system you're articulating here is
Because
not ultimately what you should be
yeah.
agreeing with.
Okay. Well, anyway, we'll do it later. If you
okay.
can come on my stream, we can continue this conversation at a later date.
Happy anytime, man. Thank you for being cordial and enjoy your AMA.
All right.
Thanks, you have a good day. Have a good Christmas.